Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Recaps and Reacts with me, Sarah, where I talk about anything current or anything from the past, movies, TV. I talk about it here on this channel and kind of do a little bit of a recap, a little bit of some reactions, my thoughts on the show or a movie. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this. I appreciate it. I appreciate you all. If this is your first time, thank you. If this is you coming back again, thank you. But let's get into it. Today I will be talking about the 2023 romance comedy Anyone But You, starring Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell. It was also directed by Will Gluck, and the story was by Alana Wolpert. So I have been excited to watch this movie. It finally came out to streaming services this past week. It's on Netflix right now. So I watched it over the weekend. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it and then do like a brief recap and then talk about my thoughts. I do want to mention there will be a little bit of spoilers per usual. I'm not going to sit there and say all the storylines, but this one I will probably be talking about the main storyline. So this is your spoiler alert. So from what I'm understanding, the internet is telling me that this was loosely inspired by Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, which I have not seen before. So, but from what I understand, it is loosely inspired by that. And there are little quotes that are peppered throughout the movie. So it kind of starts out with our main characters, which are Ben, who's played by Glen Powell, and B, who is played by Sydney Sweeney. They kind of have this little meet cute moment in the coffee shop, which it was adorbs. They meet in the coffee shop and then they end up going out later on that day, or they're like walking around the city. And they end up spending the night together. It looks like they just end up spending the night talking to one another, but it looks like they had a really good time with one another. And B wakes up and she kind of sneaks out Ben's apartment, because that's where they end up going back to after they're walking. They end up going back to Ben's apartment, but it looks like B like sneaks out, and Ben actually hears her sneaking out. And so yeah, so it shows B's on the phone talking to someone and kind of telling her the kind of magical night she had. Like, she had a really good time. And whoever she's talking to is like, well, why did you leave? And she's like, I don't know. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're right, I should go back. And so she goes back, and she goes back to Ben's apartment, and she makes it to the doorway, and Ben's best friend Pete is there. And so Ben's telling her about what happened, or telling him a little bit about last night, how he met someone, but she's a nothing, like she meant nothing. And B hears that, and so she leaves. And so then the next scene cuts to a bar, and it has like a little neon sign that says 6 months later, that's hanging in the bar. But it says 6 months later, and you see Pete and Ben are meeting his sister Claudia, and Claudia's girlfriend Hallie. They're all meeting for the first time, or excuse me, Ben is meeting them for the Hallie for the first time, because apparently Pete, his best friend, Ben's best friend, and Claudia, who is Pete's sister, the three of them all grew up together. So I guess they had to have a tight-knit relationship. So Claudia wanted Ben to meet her new girlfriend, which is Hallie, who is also B's sister. So B goes and meets, or ends up in the bar as well, and then she meets up with Hallie and Claudia, Pete, and then Ben and B see each other. And obviously they only have the one night together. They never talked after that, so there is some tension in the room at that point. So B and Ben kind of have a back and forth with one another. They see one another, they have a back and forth. They're kind of talking about some things that happened the night before, like the things that they shared with one another, but they're like kind of throwing jabs at one another. And Claudia, Hallie, and Pete are just sitting back and watching. Oh, and also B mentions to Ben that she is engaged at the moment too, so just keep that in your mind. So then we cut to this one scene where it's kind of like, I guess, a wedding invite. And we find out that Hallie and Claudia are going to get married, but they're going to get married in Sydney, Australia. So everyone has to fly out to Sydney, Australia, including Ben and B. And Ben and B are actually on the same flight going to Australia. Ben sees that, and Ben kind of goes and finds B on the plane and gives her a hard time about it. And he's just kind of like, out of all the flights that you could have taken, you got on this one. And so they're just, again, have another back and forth with one another. So they finally land in Australia, and Pete picks Ben and B up, and they end up going in the same car together. And Pete says that, where we're staying is really dope. Like, it's at my stepdad's house, and they all wanted us to stay together because they're all a part of the wedding party. So Pete tells Ben and B that they're all going to be staying under the same roof, and they're like, wish you would have said something earlier. And he's like, yeah, they don't want us to tell you because they know y'all hate each other. So we just want to tell y'all last minute. And so they're in Australia. The house is gorgeous. It's a beautiful beach house. Beautiful. So very nice. We do find out when Ben and B get to the house, Ben runs into Claudia and they talk a little bit. And Claudia mentions that Margaret was invited, and Margaret is Ben's ex-girlfriend. So Margaret is also staying at the house too. So Margaret is Ben's ex-girlfriend. So just keep that in mind. B sees her parents, and her parents are kind of asking her about Jonathan. So remember when I said at the bar that B mentioned that she was engaged? I believe Jonathan was her fiance. So I'm deducing that from that conversation, her and Jonathan are no longer together. And that I don't know if she ended up telling Ben that on the flight. I can't remember. But anyway, so B is single at the moment. Ben is single at the moment. So wonder what's going to happen. They have a dinner party later that night with everyone, and Ben and B are just bickering back and forth, and it is just like, it's just kind of like, are y'all gonna sleep together or not? Like, what is this? It's like, just do it already. It's just too much. So that's kind of annoying. But so Claudia's family and Hallie, they come up with this plan because Claudia is nervous or scared that Ben and B will ruin their wedding. So she's like, we got to come up with something for them to start liking one another because I'm afraid they're going to ruin the wedding. So the whole family comes up with a plan. Claudia's family and Hallie come up with a plan to get Ben and B to basically start liking each other. As they're doing this plan, because it's a little obvious, Ben and B figure it out. And they're just like, seriously, I can't believe they're doing this. And one of the plans, Claudia's mother wanted Ben and B to go out to the boat and get something. And while Ben and B are at the boat, they see B's parents are like, hey, B, guess who's here? And it's Jonathan. So B's parents invited Jonathan, B's ex, to come out to Australia as well. So when B sees this, she just tells Ben, like, we might as well just do it. Let's just, come up with a plan. And that way, my parents can get off my back about Jonathan, and then you can get back with Margaret. Because B can kind of see that Ben kind of maybe wants Margaret back. So she's like, she just thinks this is a good plan for the both of them. So they start acting like they like one another. And it's a bit over the top, I will say. They have some corny moments where I'm just like, please, do y'all really actually like each other? Like, get out of here. But it's a bit much. But anyway, that's the plan. They're acting like they like one another. And everyone starts to believe it. I do think there are maybe a couple of people that are skeptical. I think B's parents are kind of skeptical about it. But for the most part, they all believe that Ben and B are starting to like one another. B and Jonathan are having a conversation at the house, and it almost seems like it's a closure conversation. I'm not really sure, but it was a nice conversation. That you can tell there's no tension between her ex, like B and her ex Jonathan. They have a nice conversation. From afar, B's parents are seeing B and Jonathan having the conversation, and they kind of give each other this little high five. And at that point that B's parents had a plan to basically try to get her and Jonathan back together. Because they do mention in the movie that Jonathan was kind of like a son to them. So I guess they were really close. B and Jonathan kind of grew up together. So there's that. And the next scene is Ben and Margaret kind of having the same conversation. And you can kind of tell that Margaret wants to get back with Ben. So Ben is like, let's go. He wants to get back with Margaret too. So he goes and tells B, he's like, listen, I understand we're doing this plan, but we got to change this plan up to where, you know, if Margaret does really want to get back with me, she can just swoop on in here. But we still got to, you know, play that we still like each other, but it ain't that serious. So it's kind of like, yeah, so that part was funny. So, and you can kind of start seeing too at these moments that Ben and B still like one another, because remember, they really had a really great night that night. The first night where they met each other, like the whole meet cute moment at the coffee shop, and then they spent that night together. They really liked each other, you can tell. So those feelings, you can tell, haven't really gone anywhere. So Ben and B do have a moment where they talk about the one night that they did spend together. And we finally find out, they tell each other exactly what happened and why B left and why Ben said those things about her. So B tells Ben that she left him because she felt a fire that she had to put out, and she was scared, which basically meant she had a really strong feeling towards him. She probably could tell that she really did like him very, very quickly. She was falling fast. And she was scared of that feeling, because she does reveal that the reason why she and Jonathan had broke up was because she said they never fought. And for me, and I don't know if she actually says this, but for me, it was because they didn't have strong feelings for one another, or at least B didn't have really strong feelings towards Jonathan. But she has really strong feelings towards Ben. And then, like I said, she only met Ben that one night and she was falling fast for him, so she got scared. So then Ben tells her that he said those nasty things because he was hurt that she left unexpectedly like that. And so he didn't really feel that way about her, but he did that. He said those things out of hurt. So after they kind of clear the air, they go back to the house, have relations, which I will say was a little odd because like the whole family, both families are there. So I was like, what is? But anyway, they finally have relations. And then later that night, Ben is like, he's like, we're getting really good at faking. And B says, like, you know, faking the relationship. And B is like, yeah, I don't really know what's real and fake anymore. Everything I do is a mistake. And her back is turned to Ben because they're kind of spooning. Her back is turned to Ben when she said that. And you can kind of tell Ben's face was kind of disappointed. And I guess they end up going to sleep. And then Ben kind of slips out of the room, kind of the same thing that B did when they first met the first night. He kind of pulls like a slipping out of the room, and B sees that he left and she doesn't understand why. So that was interesting. So at this point, they're both bummed out. They're both disappointed because of another miscommunication between these two. So Pete and Ben are having a conversation. It looks like they're going to get flowers for the wedding. And Pete asks Ben, like, who are you going to pick? Are you going to pick Margaret or are you going to pick B? And Ben is just thinking out loud, like he doesn't know who to choose. And then Pete is like, stop with your white boy drama. And that was pretty funny. That was kind of funny because Pete is Black, by the way. So it was funny. But Pete says every time, he's like, you run away. Every time something gets real, you run away from it. And you move on to the next. So Pete says, it looks like it's B. So then we cut to Margaret and B. So Margaret and B are actually getting the wedding cake for the wedding. And Margaret asks what's going on between B and Ben. She's asking B that question, like, what's going on between her and Ben? And she's like, oh, it's nothing serious, like, blah, 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 da, da, da. And Margaret's like, okay, because I want to have a go at him again. Like, you know, would you be okay if I ask Ben out again? And you can kind of tell that B's a little taken aback by it because she's like, yeah, that's fine. But, you know, it's not really fine. But B thinks that, you know, Ben probably doesn't feel the same way about her. So, you know, I guess she gives Margaret the okay if she wants to ask Ben out again. So B's parents find out the secret that I'm not really going to get into. Again, watch the movie for that. But B's parents find out a secret and B's like, oh my gosh, how did you find out? And she thinks that Ben told her parents Ben told her parents. And that actually wasn't the case. Pete was actually the one who ended up telling the secret to B's parents. And then it turns into B's upset because B's like, this is why no one can trust you. She says this to Ben, and they're kind of bickering again. And yeah, so then that just forces B, because she's upset. B tells everyone, everybody, both families, because they're all standing out there. B tells everyone that the relationship between her and Ben is fake. So everybody's like, really, this whole thing was fake, da da da. So then the next thing they cut to everybody getting ready for Claudia and Hallie's wedding. And while Ben is getting ready, he overhears a conversation between Claudia and Hallie. And it sounds like Claudia and Hallie are just having an argument. And Claudia is just like, maybe we should just call off the wedding. And when Ben hears that, he's like, oh gosh. So he goes and talks to B, and he's like, we need to get it together for them because it's their wedding. We want them to get married. And so B and Ben go apologize to Claudia and Hallie and say, you know, guys, we're not going to ruin your wedding day. We're going to get along fine. And so we will we're good now. So then they end up getting married. Claudia and Hallie get married at a beautiful wedding. It looks like it was like overlooking the ocean, but it was beautiful wherever they got married, somewhere in Sydney, but it was gorgeous. And like later on at the wedding party, like the after party, like after the wedding, the reception. Later at the reception, B and her parents end up making up. B kind of is just like, you know, I'm sorry I didn't tell you that secret. And then she kind of, I guess, opens up about her feelings towards them always pushing Jonathan on her and all those things. So they kind of make up and they're good. B and her parents are good. Margaret and Ben end up dancing together, and B sees them kiss. And so B ends up asking Claudia and Hallie, be like, hey, is it okay if I go? Because they can tell she's a little upset. And they're like, she's like, are y'all cool if I just leave? I just want to go walk or people watch, just not these people. And they're like, yeah, fine, go ahead and go. B ends up leaving the party, and they cut to Margaret and Ben dancing, and Margaret kind of tells Ben that she does want to get back with him. But Ben is like, you know what? I thought I wanted this, but I don't want it. And so he kind of just leaves her on the dance floor. And I believe Ben started looking for B, but you know, B is gone. So Pete's family basically tells Ben that B left the wedding party, or excuse me, the reception, and basically you need to go after B. And he's like, well, I don't know where she went, da da da. And then even B's parents come in and join and are like, listen, man, go find the lady you love. So Ben performs the grand gesture, you know, in all rom-coms at the end of it, he performs the grand gesture. Him and B end up getting together finally. It's not fake, it's all real. They end up getting together. And that's kind of pretty much how the movie ends. And they start doing, when the credits start rolling, they end up singing Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield. If y'all know, Unwritten was a song back in, I think, 2005. Woo! But y'all know the Hills put that song on the map because that was the Hills, you know, intro song for the longest. So that is Ben's Serenity song, which watch the movie to find out what does Serenity song mean. Gotta watch the movie to find that out. But it was cute. They sing that whole song, and listen, I was up there singing that song right along in the credits too, because that's the feel good vibes. But anyway, so about a quarter through the credits, Ben and B end up apologizing to Claudia and Hallie for almost calling off their wedding. Because remember, you know, Ben had overheard that conversation with Claudia and Hallie saying that they were going to call off the wedding because they're like, Ben and B's fighting kind of was getting to them. And then Claudia and Hallie were like, oh, that was just an act. We just wanted you two to make up. So even that was an act. So anyway, the movie finally ends. So, my thoughts about this movie. I had a love and hate relationship with this movie. I do love a good rom-com. I do think this movie was a good rom-com. I loved how it started out. The meet cute was adorable. And then, the bickering between B and Ben got on my last nerve. Cause it was too much. It was just like the whole back and forth. I was just like, please shut up. And then, I also didn't like the fact that a lot of their bickering, they were there for, you know, B's sister's wedding, and Claudia, who is Ben's best friend, good friend, sister, They were there for their wedding, and it kind of revolved around being thin because they couldn't just put it to the side and get it together for those two. So that was kind of annoying because I felt like it seemed like there was more effort put towards them being Ben versus Claudia and Halle. So that was kind of annoying. It probably, maybe if it was in another setting, it would have been a little bit better. I don't know. But that was annoying. But there were some funny moments in the movie too. The movie's funny. So there was that. But yeah, I think there was a little bit of I don't want to say over dramatic moments, but like cheesy, like cheesy moments where I was like, that's not realistic, but okay. Like when they were trying to act like between B and Ben, when they were like, oh, we gotta like each other, and they were like doing the whole like nuzzle my neck and then putting their hands on their butts and stuff. That was corny, but I was like, okay. But anyway, definitely it's a cute movie. You should watch it. I watched it. I don't think I would rewatch it, but it's a cute movie. I think it's funny. I think it's lighthearted. I know I've seen some mixed reviews on it, but yeah, it's a cute movie, cute watch. So yeah, but thank you for watching my video today. Thank you for listening to this, my recap of Anyone But You. Please go watch the movie as usual because you gotta see the comedy scenes. They're hilarious. So next week I will be talking about something different. Please come back to Recaps and Reacts with me to see what I will be talking about. See you next week. Bye.